Well, welcome to the NDIS Provider Growth Podcast. I'm here with a good friend of mine. His name's Stu Paull. Hey, Stuart, you are doing good things in the NDIS. You are helping a lot of people. Why are you here? Why did you say yes to coming on this podcast?
Well, thanks for having me. Look, honestly, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Part of it is that I actually believe in the idea of what you're trying to achieve, which is I believe in the idea of cohesiveness, collaboration, and togetherness in the network professionally, and that it's really not that hard to do. And I think that sometimes it gets a little overlooked and sometimes overshadowed by other personality types that might not see it the same way. So best to sort of get on a platform together where we can sort of explore that.
Fantastic. And guys, if you don't know Stu's background, he's a BDM at Player Managers Assist. They're player managers. And Stu stands out as the player manager who actually responds to emails, who actually returns a call. He's good at stuff. And the reason Stu actually invited you on is because I think 5, 6, maybe 7 people I've sent you, providers who are stuck in some area, and I've just gone, you need to talk to Stu. And you've just opened doors for them. And you've just, one of them, I saw you wrote her like a 3-paragraph email, like it must have been 300 words of what she should do next. Stu, what's behind that? Why would someone who's a BDM in the business he works for spend all their time helping someone like me get what I need for my NDIS providers? Like, why do you care?
You go with a couple of schools of thought on that. The first is just my own personality. I'm also an ex-teacher myself, and ex-teachers, we love to educate, we love to support and nurture. That is a natural part of our personality. That's not something that's specifically with the role that we are. It's just more who we are as people. There is a part of me that is wanting to help good people connect with other good people because I do believe in the power of the network, and we'll get to that a bit more later. Um, but there's also the angle, and there's also the thing to remember that when we do make those connections, it becomes a group, it's a cluster. It's not just, I set people up to talk to you and then I never hear from either of you ever again. I'm going to hear feedback on how things were. I'm going to know from that, I can actually use that as a way to vet whether people are being sincere and genuine with me, because I'll know that from conversations with yourself, I'll hear from your experiences with them. So it's actually a multi-layered approach that actually does benefit everyone involved in that circle.
Okay, win-win. And then you've seen a lot of things that you and I would say don't work in NDIS world. Like you and I, you are a provider. I work for providers, but I was a provider. We've lived in the same thing. There's a whole lot of rubbish that happens in NDIS world that I don't think anyone's calling out. Okay, what are your thoughts on the things that we're not calling out because we're all too polite? But what are the things you're seeing people are doing that don't work or that just are nonsensical, but yet we're all going along with?
Yeah, and well, for what it's worth, I think we do call it out sometimes. I think that sometimes that we see it's just the way in which it's called out. It's not going to be standing on the soapbox screaming at the top of her lungs, those doing X, Y, Z. It might simply be that all of a sudden people stop talking about someone. It might be that they're no longer involving them in that conversation, or it might simply be the nod on the tap on the shoulder to say, "Hey mate, what's been going on? Are you doing okay? Like there's something happening." So in terms of that's it does get it. It just doesn't do it as overtly as say outside of the scheme or outside the system might not see. And I think that that's actually done for the betterment of the scheme itself. I think that if we were to do it quite so overtly, the last thing we need is more negativity in the space. I think we get enough of that from outside. And so by making sure that we're really sort of doing what we need to do, but doing it in a way that's not so loud, we're trying to correct behavior really. Again, teacher, trying to correct behavior in a way that is done subtly, where it feels like it's the choice of the person that's making those choices and not those around them sort of, guiding them and forcing them to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. Being bad should not be something that comes naturally. Being good should be easy because being nice doesn't come out of an NDIS plan.
I like it. I love it. Okay, so you are one of the most networked guys I know. When I jump on LinkedIn, of all the people on my LinkedIn, and there's, I don't know, maybe 1,000, maybe 500, whatever. Well, of all them, you and I share the most connections in common. Okay, so obviously you're very collaborative. You really want to involve people. What's behind that? Yes, there's the marketing answer of, oh, it's good for all of us. Yes, but why? What is it that makes it that you just want to spend your whole time talking to people, particularly providers, when it's not even directly related to your job sometimes?
A lot of it is to do with the fact that I am trying to play catch up. I mean, for those that don't know, because the vast majority of people who listen to this podcast may not necessarily know me or know what I'm like, my systems experience is lower than a lot of those other really fantastic people in the network. There's people that have been there since day dot. I'm coming in much later, so I feel the need to overcompensate. And the way I'm overcompensating is by trying to meet as many different people, meet different providers. And it's not just one type of provider. I'm actually trying to meet them all. The only way to know what's good and what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, is to know both sides. I mean, if you're a bit of a Star Wars fan, if there's any of your Star Wars fans out there, you're not going to know what the dark side is like until at least you've seen it. You don't have to actually enjoy it, but you have to at least know what it's like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Stu, a lot of the support you're giving people when I'm asking you to help out my clients or whatever is helping people who are small providers or medium providers who have hit a wall and they're getting stuck. And I guess I'd love to know, Stu, what do you see people doing that is making them stuck? Because I see these mistakes by people who've got 3 participants, but I'm also seeing it by people who've got 300. Like, where do you think people are getting stuck with their growth, whereas 2 years ago it was easy to grow? What are you seeing?
In terms of the very small, the less than 10 participant providers, those very small ones, it comes down to the way in which they engage the community. In fact, I could give you an example, even just this morning. So I was actually meeting with a young entrepreneur this morning who has reached out and started building their own business. This particular provider offers a couple of different services, but they were clearly very green to running their own business, and that's in any industry. That was just to running a business in general. So this is not necessarily a disability specific thing, but the approach that they had been using in how to try and find participants, and I really don't like using that phrase, but that's what they were trying to do, is by going on to Facebook and Meta using a standard Canva advertisement that lists just the services that were being done, and we have capacity. Honestly, as much as I know that there are those out there that say this is a good idea, you don't stand out in a flock of sheep by being a sheep. And unfortunately, this particular provider was doing exactly that and then wondering why they weren't going any further. And so I had then asked them, like, what are you doing to connect with other providers in your area? What are you doing to connect with those providers around you? And it was actually astounding to say that this particular person did not know that that even existed, felt that other providers were out to get them, and that they were competing. And it was really cutthroat. And, oh, it's so savage, and oh, it's so brutal. And I then had to then question the particular person. I'm like, so where do you think referrals come from? Like, where do you think that these participants come from? Oh, it's from me reaching out and getting them to sign up directly. Well, and I think this then starts to speak to that small to medium enterprise, when we start going to that 100 participants, 200 participants, is that how you engage the community. Word of mouth will only get you so far amongst participants. So we've got Dunbar's number, which is a certain number of people within our own circles of our society that we can only extend to. It's about 150, I believe, is the number of Dunbar's number. And so once you extend beyond that, you then have to then cluster by groups, which is where things like organized religion come from, sporting groups, associations, and things like that. And within the NDIS, the same thing speaks for participants. Participants have a limited social circle. They only see so many people per day, and it's smaller than the average social circle because they don't have the same level of opportunity as the rest of us. You and I, for example, Michael, we go out and meet other providers. That collective then becomes the network. The network then becomes larger, which allows us to expand our circle of connection. And so where I think it is going wrong potentially, and again, I can't speak for every business because I don't know their cash flow. I don't know what their certain business aspects look like. But in terms of their potential moving forward in growth, really comes down to how they engage with wider network, how they are being presented to other providers, and not just copying what everyone else is doing on Facebook and Meta, and then wondering why it's not working.
I love it. It's like you're preaching to the choir, but it's like what you said about if you want to be a sheep and you're with other sheep, you don't stand out. And then I can see how someone who is a sheep, being a sheep, would then blame the system. The system's out to get me, or it's cutthroat or whatever. That person's speaking from that point of discouragement. Of they've gone around circles, they haven't succeeded, but they also haven't reached out for much help. So that discouragement sets in and that embitterment sets in, and then people want to throw in the towel, you know. And I mean, were you able to help her beyond, hey, this isn't working, try this? Like, what else could she have got from you without having to go through the tragedy of feeling useless for a while? Like, what else were you able to do for her?
So I also then discussed the number of services being provided, and I know that there'll be some of your listeners out there that will see those providers that try to offer every single service. And I then asked this particular person, I'm like, so how many people have you got working for you if you're offering all of these services? Oh no, it's just me. And I said, unfortunately, that comes up as a big old crimson red flag for those of us in the network that want to try and be able to refer outward to try and find the right person, because it's that we're looking for that really special person, that really niche person that's going to do a great job, because that participant's a person. That participant has a family that cares about them, has people around them that care. And by throwing them to just any old provider who does that particular service, that's not us doing that level of care. That's us just sort of throwing them to the wolves. And I know we're going from sheep to wolves here, but the idea of like jack of all trades, master of none really comes to the forefront. And so what I then said was, well, which services in particular do you really want to focus on? And instead of trying to offer everything to everybody and hope that you can just, it's that spray and pray kind of mentality for your gamers out there, which is just take a shot, hope that it works, and just see if something happens. That's not you really making a change. That's just you trying to still get some cash flow going. And again, it then comes back to find your niche, find your specialty, whether it be in a service or whether it be in a particular disability or a particular demographic. It might be a particular sector of the community, and not just, oh, the disability space, because there's 714,000 participants expected to be on the NDIS in the next 3 months. So that's not exactly a niche. 714,000 is a massive number. And provider that's got, say, 3 out of 714,000 is not going to get anywhere by just sort of hoping, spraying and praying and hoping for the best. So yeah, in terms of what I would suggest is, yeah, find what you're really passionate about, find what you're really good at, because what you're passionate about is where you're going to make the most positive change in the community. And that positive change in the community will then drive people to want to use you, because they'll buy into what you're doing because you actually care.
Wow, that makes heaps of sense. And I even see the same with your medium providers. Like, say someone's got, say, 200 participants. I see them going, look, we're having trouble growing because everyone's plans are being cut. Let's be real, it's the truth. And the government's throwing more and more hurdles before you get on NDIS. And it's harder to sell the same services they were selling a year ago. So they're like, oh, well, we'll just do more. It's like, hold on, by doing more, your staff don't have that skill set. Or if they do, you might have 1 or 2 staff who do. And what are you going to do when they leave you? All you're doing is making the same mistake that the newbie provider makes, which is just over-promising and hoping you can deliver. And that's embarrassing for all of us. And Stu's not going to recommend you. And Michael's not going to recommend you. So it's almost like this desperation is set in. And it's like, I'm watching morale drop, Stu. I'm watching people's sense of confidence in their business model drop. And then they start saying and doing silly things. It's like, Stu, let's imagine if you were to hit a wall tomorrow and you were to be like, whoa, I have not had a new inquiry for 6 weeks. Okay, it's not likely for you, but let's imagine. What would be your next moves?
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm absolutely going to go back to the drawing board and see where my communication is breaking down. Is it that it's breaking down in the initial stages of where I'm reaching out to people, or is it that I'm reaching out, they're responding back, and then there's no follow-up? Where in that chain are things breaking down? And if it's purely because I am doing something wrong, I can then start working on that. Maybe it's that I'm coming across as too forceful, or it might be that my reputation has been damaged because I have done something foolish. Unlikely. I do a lot of things foolish and I seem to be doing okay. But the idea is, where is it breaking down? And if I can work out where it's breaking down, I can then start to remedy the situation and then work my way backwards. So for those small to, let's say, more medium enterprises, it really comes down to find out where in the chain things are going wrong. And it's almost like a sales process without the actual exchange of dollars. It really comes down to that interaction. Where is it falling short? Is it that your message is wrong? Is it that they're not understanding you? It's got to be somewhere along those lines. For you to go from doing very well to all of a sudden having a dry spell, first thing is still look inward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the other thing is, if things are not working out, maybe you don't need to go and pay some highly paid consultant. maybe you just need to ask 5 people who know you well. Like, I know if I was to ask you, Stu, what could I do differently that would help? I'm sure you can think of at least 5 things I've said or done on LinkedIn that have been untactful before we even start. So I don't need to pay a consultant massive money. I just need to ask the people around me, and there are always ways forward. But if you get to that point, like that other person you were telling me about just then, where you're discouraged and you think the world's out to get you, it's time to rethink your strategy. Stu, I love what you do. I love what you stand for. I love that you help so many people, including people I send you who you'd never ever met before. Okay, if someone wants to get in touch with you, one, tell us about your podcast first. What's your podcast all about?
Yes, so my podcast is a little bit different to some of the others that might be out there. Mine is called TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read. Really is that 5 to 7 minute sort of bite-sized podcast. It is due to release very soon. By the time this goes, it might even be out. So if you're not sure, the thing to do is one, check me out on LinkedIn, so Stu Paull. Otherwise, you can also email me at fpaull, SPAULL, at planmanageassist.com.au. Free to get in touch with me. And yeah, it's basically education in bite-sized chunks. Perfect if you're on the way to work and you work from home.
Love your work, Stu, and I appreciate your time.